Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you are watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. A powerful 6.3 magnitude earthquake strikes near the Mazar-e-Sharif in northern Afghanistan, killing at least 20 people and injuring over 500. The quake damaged Mazar's historic Blue Mosque as rescue teams race to reach remote areas. A 32-year-old man is charged with 10 counts of attempted murder after multiple passengers were stabbed on a London-bound train. Anthony Williams was arrested at Huntingdon Station and will appear in court later today. Israel's former military advocate general, Maj General Yafet Tomer Yerushalmi, is arrested after leaking a video allegedly showing abuse of a Palestinian detainee. She resigned last week and was found after being reported missing near Tel Aviv. Israel returns the bodies of 45 Palestinians after Hamas hands over the remains of 3 Israeli soldiers. The exchange marks a rare sign of progress under the fragile US-brokered ceasefire in the 2-year war. US President Donald Trump says he doubts war with Venezuela, but warns President Nicolas Maduro's days are numbered. This comes as the US builds its largest military presence in the Caribbean in decades, amid strikes on drug smuggling boats. Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei says cooperation with the United States is impossible while it supports Israel and maintains bases in the region. He adds that Washington's interference in the Middle East makes any partnership unthinkable. US Energy Secretary Chris Wright says the US is not planning nuclear explosions after President Trump's call to resume weapons testing sparked global concern. He says the tests are non-critical and Nevada residents have no worries. 3 climbers, including a foreigner, are dead and 8 others missing after an avalanche struck a team on Yolngu Himal in Nepal. Police say 5 of the missing are foreign nationals as rescue teams battle to reach the site. US President Donald Trump has expressed confidence that Russian President Vladimir Putin would like to boost trade between the two countries. Trump has said in an interview that the expansion of trade and economic ties between Russia and the United States would be an excellent course of developments. He has added that he thinks that the Russian president wants to come in and make trade with the United States, and that Putin wants to make a lot of money for Russia. This comes as the US recently cancelled a planned Budapest summit between the two leaders after Russia sent a memo to Washington noting its firm stance on its demands regarding Ukraine. Okay, now joining us to discuss this and more is Andrew Latham. He is a professor of international relations and he joins us live from Minneapolis in the United States. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, this comes on the backdrop of the Ukraine war. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin's relationship has been nothing short of complicated during these negotiations. But Donald Trump speaking of boosting trade with Moscow. How strange is that, even after Donald Trump placed huge damaging sanctions on 2 of Moscow's largest crude companies?
Well, this is entirely consistent with President Trump's modus vivendi, as it were. Some days he has the stick out and he's threatening Vladimir Putin, do this or else. And other days he has the carrots out. If you do this, you'll be rewarded. And that's the mode, the phase we're in at the moment, I think. He's not offering anything in the short term because of sanctions and other considerations. But in the medium to long term, especially if Vladimir Putin brings this war to an end soon, President Trump is holding out the prospect of enhanced trade between the two countries, thinking that that will be enough to induce President Putin to change his approach to this war. I think that's a bit of a leap, but that's the mode that President Trump is in at the moment.
Yes, and Andrew, what sectors will benefit the most if Moscow did indeed, the United States did indeed decide to reopen trade routes with Moscow?
Well, they would probably be, again, in the medium term, non-strategic, non-sanctioned goods, and there are plenty of those. The Europeans are still doing plenty of business with Russia in those sectors. So that's the low-hanging fruit, as it were. In the longer term, I don't think there's much scope. The United States is not going to be trading with Russia on cutting-edge AI technologies, for example, and things like that, because it doesn't want to give up its edge, its advantage, and there's no reason why it would be interested in. The Russians don't have much to offer in those sectors. So I think it would be low-value-added consumer goods, not with no dual use or obvious strategic value. And that is providing, of course, that the war is winding down, that the war ends in a way that satisfies President Trump's vision of how the war should end.
Yes, indeed, Andrew. Do stay with us as we move on to further updates. But this time we head to West Asia, where, according to Gaza's health ministry, Israel has returned the bodies of 45 Palestinians to Gaza, raising the total number handed over under the current ceasefire deal to 270. The deal, brokered by US President Donald Trump, requires Israel to return 15 Palestinian bodies for every deceased Israeli recovered. On Monday, the 3rd of November, Israel confirmed that the remains handed over by Hamas belonged to 3 hostages killed during the October the 7th attacks. Captain Omar Nutra, Corporal Oz Daniel, and Colonel Asaf Hamami, the highest-ranking Israeli officer killed. I do apologize, they were not hostages, they were Israeli Defense Forces soldiers. Hamas said it found the remains in a tunnel area in southern Gaza. The group had been holding 48 hostages, including 20 alive when the truce began on October the 10th. All surviving hostages have since been freed, and Hamas has started returning the bodies of the dead. Israel accuses Hamas of delays, while Hamas says many bodies remain trapped under rubble and have asked the Red Cross and mediators for help to recover them. Andrew Latham joins us once again. Andrew, is this a step forward? How would you analyse how well this ceasefire is currently going? Obviously, we have seen violence during this time since October the 10th, when it officially came into effect. But many experts keep calling it fragile, extremely fragile. Why?
Well, it is fragile, and it's meant to be the easy phase, of course. Phase 2 and phase 3 are meant to be much more problematic. And so the first phase was intended to address some immediate concerns, but also to build momentum and to create a context within which confidence building could take place. And it has been, I think, a rockier road than a lot of people anticipated. On the Hamas side, it has been difficult to get at some of these bodies, given the damage to the infrastructure and the damage to Hamas's command and control system. I'm sure they didn't know where all these bodies were. And also both sides use this as leverage. The overall ceasefire remains fragile. Both sides occasionally take pot shots at each other, and more than that, I'm trivializing it now. The Israelis launched targeted strikes, and Hamas has been both purging its own population of so-called collaborators, but also periodically attacking Israeli forces. So fragile, yes, but every time we see a positive sign like the return of bodies, or earlier the return of hostages and the exchange of prisoners for hostages, those are good signs.
Indeed. And of course, the deal brokered by US President Donald Trump requires Israel to return 15 Palestinian bodies for every 1 deceased Israeli. What does that say about proportionality during this war?
I'm not sure I can comment on the sort of proportionality in moral terms, but this is an old practice between Hamas, Palestinian Authority on the one hand, and the Israelis on the other. It's always a disproportionate exchange. Usually, in one case in recent history, one Israeli was released for over 1,000 Palestinians released. So it gives you some sense of, I guess, the leverage that capturing an Israeli has with the Israeli population. But it's common. It's a common phenomenon in these sorts of circumstances.
And of course, Andrew, all surviving hostages have been released. If this ceasefire were to fall apart again, what is stopping Israel? What would be the next process? What bargaining chips do Hamas still have?
Well, they have very few on the ground. Military assets have been severely degraded, so that there's not that. The so-called Ring of Fire and Iran's patronage isn't worth very much anymore. The Israelis have demonstrated they can strike in the heart of Tehran with impunity, and they've more or less destroyed Hezbollah, etc. So the broader international community can bring pressure to bear on Israel. Washington could, for example. The Europeans can. China, perhaps, if it were to get a little bit more involved. But that's really the only kind of pressure points that Israel is vulnerable to at the moment. Certainly not on the battlefield, and certainly not in the immediate region. Even states like Turkey, once upon a time a very good friend of Israel's, now in a more adversarial relationship, is not really in a position to use much leverage to change Israelis' perspective. So it would come down to Brussels, London, Paris, Berlin, and Washington. And it remains to be seen if those countries are really willing to put that kind of pressure on.
Andrew Latham, thank you. It's always a pleasure to get your insight, and thank you for taking the time. Now we turn to the Indo-Pacific, and in China's eastern city of Hangzhou, Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin met with his Chinese counterpart Li Qiang, reaffirming what both sides call their mutual trust and strategic partnership. Premier Li described China and Russia as good neighbours and said Beijing is willing to expand cooperation across various sectors while safeguarding shared security interests. Meanwhile, Ms. Hustin praised the dynamic growth of bilateral ties, despite what he called Western sanctions and obstacles. The meeting comes as both nations continue to strengthen political and economic coordination amid ongoing tensions with the West. Let's take a listen in to what both of the leaders had to say.
Китайская сторона готова с российскими коллегами в духе важных договоренностей наших лидеров укреплять стратегический диалог, углублять взаимодействие во всех областях, чтобы эффективнее защищать наши интересы в области развития и безопасности.
Наши отношения России и Китая находятся на самом высоком уровне за всю многовековую историю, и продолжают динамично развиваться по всем направлениям, несмотря на различные препятствия и незаконные санкции Запада.
Now we're joined by Dr. Bonnie Yoshi Liao. She's an assistant professor of diplomacy and international relations at Tamkang University in Taiwan. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program. It's a pleasure to have you. Premier Li says China and Russia are good neighbours with a mutual trust. What does this signal about the current depth of the relationship, the partnership, especially given the Russians' ongoing war in Ukraine, which of course is internationally condemned, and of course China's tensions with the West as well?
When Beijing says good neighbors with mutual trust, it's a bit like two poker players complementing each other's bluff. They sit at the table, but each one's hiding a different deck of cards. China wants to look less isolated after quietly backing Putin's war, and Russia wants to look less abandoned by the world. They share an interest in undermining the U.S.-led order, but not in trusting each other. So if Putin were a stock, Xi would buy it cheap and short it the minute sanctions tighten. So yes, they smile for the cameras, but it's convenience. It's convenience dressed up as brotherhood.
Yes, indeed. And China's premier emphasized that mutual security interests are at the top of the agenda. How aligned are Beijing and Moscow's long-term security goals, especially, of course, in Asia and Europe?
Whenever Beijing talks about the mutual security, I hear mutual self-interest. Russia's security goal is to redraw Europe's borders, and China's is to rewrite Asia's rules. The overlap, yes, weakening America's ability to stop them. Beyond that, their paths split fast. Moscow's fighting to survive, and Beijing's playing a 30-year chess game. So they coordinate tactics, not destiny. It's like two chefs sharing a kitchen, but arguing over whose recipe gets cooked. So their cooperation ends right where their egos begin.
Yes, and finally, both sides are talking about deepening strategic communication here. Is this meant to reassure one another, or is this sending a message to NATO and even Washington?
Yes, deepening strategic communication. That's diplomatic poetry for comparing notes on how to annoy Washington. They're not swapping missile codes, they're swapping talk points. It reassures each other, don't make a deal with the United States too soon, and it tells NATO, see, we're in sync. But under the surface, Moscow's begging for Chinese drones and loans, while Beijing's careful not to get dragged into another reckless war. So think of it as speed dating for strongmen. Lots of flattery, but no long-term commitment.
Yes, Dr. Bonnie Yuhi Liao, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have had you on the programme. Now we turn to South Asia for our next update, and disagreements among Bangladeshi political parties have stalled a crucial democratic reform plan. The interim government has given rival parties a week to reach consensus or simply faced unilateral action. The warning has come from Nobel Peace Prize winner Muhammad Yunus himself, who leads Bangladesh's interim administration as chief advisor. Yunus took over last year's popular uprising that ousted former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who later fled to India. According to Yunus, the reform charter is central to restoring democracy and preventing a return to authoritarian rule. The July Charter, named after the 2024 revolt, proposes limiting prime ministers to 2 terms and expanding presidential powers. Now, key parties have signed the document in October, but disagreements remain over whether it should be put to a referendum. Additionally, Law Minister Asif Nazrul has also commented on the matter. Let's take a listen to the statement.
দীর্ঘদিন আলোচনার পরও কয়েকটি সংস্কারের সুপারিশ বিষয়ে ভিন্নমত রয়েছে। এছাড়া গণভোট কবে অনুষ্ঠিত হবে এবং এর বিষয়বস্তু কি হবে এসব প্রশ্নে রাজনৈতিক দলগুলোর মধ্যে যে মতভেদ দেখা দিয়েছে সেজন্য সভায় উদ্বেগ প্রকাশ করা হয়। এই প্রেক্ষিতে গণভোটের সময় কখন হবে, মানে গণভোট কবে অনুষ্ঠিত হবে, গণভোটের বিষয়বস্তু কি হবে, জুলাই সনদে বর্ণিত ভিন্নমতগুলো প্রসঙ্গে কি পদক্ষেপ নেওয়া হবে তা নিয়ে ঐক্যমত কমিশনের প্রস্তাবগুলোর আলোকে জরুরি ভিত্তিতে চূড়ান্ত সিদ্ধান্ত গ্রহণ করা প্রয়োজন বলে সভা অভিমত ব্যক্ত করে।
We're now joined by Prashanta Kumar Shil, a political commentator, joining us live from Dhaka in Bangladesh. Thank you very much, Prashanta, for joining us here on NewsX World. The government has called on parties to agree on this reform plan. What are the main areas of reform under discussion, electoral, economic or constitutional?
Yes, you know that this is from the present government, from Dr. Mohammad Yunus, who is a Nobel laureate, and he passes already 1 year and is almost already his cabinet declared that in the next election maybe 2026 February. But you know that when he can just in oath for our government from the interim government. So we see that there is too much popularity in the ground reality. But now we see that all the political party can be divided. Some specific agenda. The one agenda, very important agenda, the referendum. You know that the referendum, now the question is coming from referendum, and also the July Charter. All the political party made it as a July Charter, some specific targeting some point. But we see the present time, that kind of charter is some actually some political party take it a very positive, and some political party is some bargaining it. So we know that there's a reform committee in the banner of the government, and we see that they haven't allied all the political parties to discuss about that, to make a charter. But we see that in the present time, the reality of the present time, they are undivided and divided in some specific areas. So the present political system, you know that the upcoming election is February, already chief advisor declared that February 26th, and very short time, we have been in very hand, and 4 months only for the new election. But that time, from a very simple time, we see that there is some divided issues, the political arena, especially the referendum, and another issue is the July Charter. So it's very tough to political party to engaging in one platform within a very short time. So it's a challenge for the President Professor Yunus, Dr. Mohammed Yunus government. What is happening, and how we can just stimulate all the parties in Basel? Really tough, because all are the bargaining their particular rules and policies also.
Yeah, and how stable is the political situation in Bangladesh right now, and how serious is the risk of renewed political unrest if the opposition were to reject this proposal?
Yes. As you know that the majority party still behind that kind of reform in the July Charter. You know that the Awami League is not here, and the Jatiyo Party is not here. So the 50% people are behind that kind of July Charter. How you can take it a charter, and in one vessel, you can totally, this is a very alliance from all the political parties alliance, the reform of the constitution, but how you can make it a reform of the constitution? Very impossible without the majority people, and you take it is a very ground reality. See the ground reality, the political unstable and unrest situation. It's impossible to the present government, Dr. Mohammed Yunus, to make a unique and unified July Charter to give the people, because it's already happening. You know that what the bonding, we see that in the 5th August after the accusation of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Now what the positions now? All the political parties, they don't trust each other. Their main narrative to just go onto the power. So how you can say that this is a very, you can make a very united from every matter and metaphor? It's very impossible to present it. But political terminology says different things.
Yes, Prashanta, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you on. We now move on once again and over to Africa, and the prosecutor's office at the International Criminal Court warned that the atrocities committed in the Sudanese city of El Fasher could constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity. The ICC prosecutor's office voiced profound alarm and deepest concern over reports from El Fasher about mass killings, rapes and other crimes allegedly committed. After 18 months of siege, bombardment and starvation, the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces seized control of the city in Darfur on October the 26th, dislodging the army's last stronghold in Sudan's western region. Meanwhile, the head of the Red Cross says that history is repeating itself in Sudan's Darfur region after reports of these mass killings. President of the International Committee of the Red Cross says that tens of thousands of people had fled Al Fasher after the RSF seized the city, and it was likely that tens of thousands more were trapped there without access to food, water or medical assistance. Let's listen in to what the president had to say.
I mean, it's atrocious what we hear from the people that we speak to, and it repeats what I saw already more than 2 years ago when I was in Chad at the border to Darfur. I mean, it's history repeating, and it becomes worse every time a place is taken over by the other party. And there's just no restraint in what these weapon bearers do. And this is what I find most concerning. Tens of thousands have left Al-Fashir, have fled. But there are many tens of thousands more that we assume are still in Al-Fashir and have no access to food, water, or medical assistance that they need very urgently. You have to bear in mind that most of the health system in Sudan has collapsed, and definitely not in Darfur. So whilst people are being wounded, there's no means to treat them.
Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.